Welcome, everybody. It's Flair Educators. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a little bit of different session. Oh, wait, I see our interviewee is here and she's waiting backstage. So, Angie,
Let me get you started. All right. So, welcome. We are Flair. We're educators who care about teaching. We're still in the classroom. We love our students. We're passionate about our jobs. And we want to keep other teachers teaching and students who are going to become teachers like us and join us in the field. We want to get you excited and passionate about teaching. But like all teachers, we have some really big challenges in our classroom. And so today we've invited a literary expert to come in and teach us about the science of reading, teach us how to make reading more engaging, and teach us how to get our students so that our lowest level students and students who identify themselves as non-readers then get excited about reading. Because if you're anything like me right now in the classroom since the pandemic, we have kids who read at like the really low level and then kids who read at the really, really high level, and they're all in the same room with us.
Yeah, so let's bring her on.
Yay!
There we go. Welcome, Gail.
Hi, Gail. Welcome.
Hi. For some reason, this is on my phone, not my computer, so I don't know how this will work. Is that supposed to be that way?
You're great.
Think of it just as a Zoom.
Okay.
You're all good.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
So I've actually been in education for 45 years. And really, if you want to talk about it, basically most of my life, my little brother's severely handicapped. And so I grew up with him not being allowed to go to school. So this was something I ended up feeling very passionate about. And so I taught junior high RSP for 3 years. Then I taught moderate severe. And then I spent the last 29 years teaching elementary RSP and also starting to teach college and train college students. And now I've been training college students for about 30 years and have been full-time at National University for a while now. So what happened to me is I switched from teaching moderate severe students over to an RSP position. And I had these 6 first graders that were identified for SPED into kindergarten. And it was February, and they still didn't know their sounds and signals. And they didn't know the name of the letter. They didn't know the sound of the letter. They couldn't write the letter. And I knew what I was doing. I had been working with really low kids. So I was really befuddled about what was going on, that this wasn't working. So I went to a workshop at a CARS conference, that's California Association of Resource Specialists, and went to a session there where I saw someone using a technique. And please know that I'm not trying to push this company, but it was called Zoophonics. But what they had done is they were special ed teachers that were up in a little tiny community, and they worked with every level of kids, and they developed a system where they used whole body to learn how to read. And they would stand up and they would have a picture of an animal card, and the students would go, alligator says, ah, ah. And then they had all kinds of methods for transitioning that into phonemic awareness and into hands-on learning. And so I took it back to my classroom, and I only had the kids for 30 minutes a day, but in 3 days, they knew all the sounds and the signals. And
so that was a lot of information, and I love how passionate and excited you are of it. If you can let us kind of guide you a little so that we can make sure our audience is on the same page. What age were these students?
Though they were first graders.
Okay.
That were identified in kindergarten.
Okay. Wonderful. So today we're going to talk specifically about literacy and getting kids excited about reading. Is this predominantly for elementary, or does this work all the way through high school?
It can go all the way through high school.
Okay.
And let me explain that one. It
Okay.
sounds odd. I guess the best way is for me to tell stories.
Yeah, stories are always great. Okay, good stories.
I had this program going on in my classroom, and the way I structured it, they could come in and anybody could, once they learned the movements, and it's not even so much that the movements are important, it's that it's whole brain, that you're using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. But I had some parents come to me, and they were other teachers. They were teachers in my district, and they said, Gail, we're really worried about our son. And you've got this tutoring program through the high school. Would you take him as one of your tutors? And I said, sure. Now, you need to know this kiddo was a junior in high school. He was captain of the football team, and he was failing high school. And both of his parents were teachers. To this day,
oh my goodness, both of his parents were teachers?
Yes. And I believe he had an undiagnosed disability.
I think a lot of times throughout my career as a high school teacher, I think a lot of athletes like slip through the system that way, but I've never heard of one where the parents were teachers.
So he came to me, and he was there. It was a class. He was there every day, 4 days a week. And I taught him the movements. I said, you've got to do it big, and then I'll help show you how to make it little for the kids. Because I wanted him to start from the basics as a tutor. He needed to know all this. So as he's tutoring the students, he gets it. He learns something that I call word karate, where he learns how to chunk words. He learns how to sound them out because he's tutoring, right?
Well, this is so great too, because I've used tutors a lot with my kids, and every kid is excited to help tutor. And I'm always surprised that the kids that I might be like a little worried about what kind of influence they'll be on the little ones end up often being the sweetest and the most connected. So I love this idea of taking him away from his peers and letting him be the role model. And because he's got to teach them, he's teaching through doing. And then that doesn't make the movement embarrassing. It makes it empowering.
Well, and so by the end of the semester, he looked at me and he says, I can't believe it. He goes, I've got it now. He says, I just needed something like this. And it broke, it all came together for him. And I've always had a dream to train a bunch of tutors and pay them to teach little ones, and why they managed to fix their reading at the same time.
Yeah. No, I love that you did that, because you knew that he needed that instruction, but you were able to help him save face by having him learn in this different way, and to become that role model and the mentor to the younger kids while still learning the content. So that was awesome.
Well, one of the things I did is I told the high school, I don't want your straight A kids.
Mm-hmm.
Don't send me your straight A kids to help tutor these students, because the straight A kids didn't understand why the kids didn't get it.
So they can't relate. And then it doesn't build their skills either. I like this idea of tutoring, thinking about like Kagan groups, for example. That's the power of that, is you're tutoring the level just below you, like to get the foundation just a little tighter. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, the whole thing about readers at difficulty is this: some children read because of us, and some children read in spite of us. So, you have to figure out what each kiddo needs to do, but we have to continue to go back to the science of reading, because the idea of teaching explicit phonics seemed out of style for so long. But to be honest with you, it's what makes the difference when kids don't get it. And adding play to it.
Okay, so yeah, so let's start at the basics. So I've got a kid in my class. I teach 8th grade. I'm teaching history, so I'm not even teaching English. They're not reading well. What do I do?
Well, here's the problem. Filling in the missing pieces when you're a history teacher is really difficult. You actually have to teach explicit, systematic, multimodal science, or multimodal history, and that is really tough to do. You could use, if I were teaching junior high and I had students that could not read social studies, I would use Anita Archer's rewards for history program at that level, because she does, in her rewards for history, she breaks down how to say some of the words. So when you're looking at history and science, the vocabulary is very dense for those, and the words can be much more difficult to decode. So those are two areas that our students at risk really struggle in because of the vocabulary.
One of the things I've had a lot of success. Of course, I taught English for years before I moved, both. But what I've had a lot of success with is building plays with costumes. And then what I do is I write in different levels of the characters, so that there's multiple characters in my plays, and then they reach different levels so that I know which characters can handle it. And a lot of times I'll make my most fun characters, my loud characters, I don't want to do this characters, like a little lower level, but they're more fun to play. So then they have a good experience with the play the first time they get to dress up. I give them a bunch of extra credit, or maybe I give them, candy at the end. And then what happens is they get hooked, and they'll start wanting to read more and more and more. And by the end of the year, one, they can read, and two, they're like, when are we doing our play? I need to dress up, and they start to kind of see themselves as actors. And I'm batting 100% with it.
Oh,
which has been really interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun. Here's the one thing we don't know about older readers that don't read well. They have a lot of learned helplessness. They failed, so now I no longer get to try. And most of our kids actually have a lot more background than they think they have.
Yeah.
That is true.
Failed at it so much that, I don't know. I don't know what that word is. And so that's part of our struggle. But you can do silly things. It might not work in history class, but if you were in English class and you're working on teaching junior high school kids, give them a set of blend cards, give them a whole bunch of blend cards, put them in a group and have them play Go Fish. Oh, Sue, do you have a bull? Tom, do you have a truck? And you have a couple decks of phonics cards and switch them back and forth. And just a simple game like that reinforces their concept that they know of that information, and we've made it fun. Because here's the thing, playing games and gamifying phonics is really a blast, and kids think it's fun.
One of the ways to gamify phonics, if you teach like older ones, like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and high school, is like you can do like battle reenactments, or I don't know if you've ever done vocab snowball fights. Those are so fun. So you write the higher, like I just did one with the word sovereignty, for example. They were just having such a hard time with the word sovereignty. So you write the word sovereignty down, and then you crumple it up into a piece of paper, and then they have to say it 3 times. And if they all chant it loud enough and do it right, everyone in the class, then they get to line up on the other sides, and then I let them throw it at each other. And then they pick it up and they yell sovereignty back, and then they get to throw it, and they kind of volley back and forth. And by the time they've said it, all the research that I've read says 7 times, that they need to use it 7 times correctly and in its context, then it sticks. And it's so then on the way out of the door, I'll have them throw it at me and yell sovereignty. And they love that, because then they feel independent, and it associates, the concept of the word being independent and separate from, works with, I threw it at my teacher, so she doesn't have power over me. Of course, I only let them throw it at my feet, so don't think that I let them throw things at my face. But it's a fun way to get them excited and It's crazy how sweet they are. Like they're very careful. They don't, you would think they'd be like mean, and no, they're very much like, I don't want to hurt you. Or, it's fun.
So the other thing you can do is take one of those cheap beach balls.
Yes.
Yes.
Blow those up and write all those vocabulary words, or write multiplication tables, or write, phonics sounds, and they catch it, and whatever's in their face, they have to say that sound.
Yes. That's a great way to simplify it and to do academic vocabulary that's hard. Yeah.
But your thing with sovereignty just made me think of a game. What if you had the sounds in the word sovereignty laid out on a piece of paper and used a hacky sack to throw at the different sounds of the word, like sov, ren, t, and have them throw the hacky sack, hit the ball and say the sound, hit the paper with the hacky sack and say the sound at the same time. So
I love that.
teaches kids to chunk.
Right. Yeah. And with those big academically specific words, that's really helpful for them to see how it breaks down.
So here's another funny one you could do. You could do this with older kids or little kids. You could take any words you want, and you could put the words in the corner of a foursquare. And every time someone hits the ball into that foursquare, they have to read the word that's in that square.
Oh, that's fun.
That's fun.
And
I like
that. Just do a little paper, but like that's a lesson that takes 5 seconds because they can do a little paper ball and just drop it. And one of the things that I've learned is if you have them close their eyes, they love that. Like stand over it, hold it, and then close your eyes and then drop it, because the element of surprise is fun. Or you can, like, we have blindfolds sometimes where we do like drawing activities. So that could be fun too. You could have them like draw on a paper, and then whatever the line touches, that's the sounds they have to say.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that is really not, some people don't recognize how important it is teaching kids to blend. And blending is probably the big major stepping stone to automaticity. And the ability, when kids can't blend quickly, means that they haven't gotten the meaning of what they're reading. So most of your special ed kids out there, when you look at them, really cannot blend fluently and quickly.
Okay, wait. We got to break this down for me because, you're too smart. Okay, so blending is just when I take the two sounds and put them together, like sovereignty, right? That's right. Blending.
Right. Yes, but they need to know all the parts. So when you're teaching kids who read, you just don't jump around. You make sure that it's sequential. You teach CVC words, right? Then you teach blends, then you teach, ending blends. So it's a sequence where you don't commit what I call a suicide. Assume that the kids know these sounds. You actually need to make sure you teach them all, or test that they know it, but not just know it in a blend. So, and the idea is like I do blending drill. I put cards down in front of, and then they say the imaginary sound as quickly as they can. And that makes for fluidity. That makes for automaticity.
So you use that word a couple of times. What is automaticity, and why should teachers care about it?
Okay, well, I'm going to describe it in a funny way. So when you started driving, tell me how your body was when you was a brand new driver.
When I started driving, I was so nervous.
You were nervous. Your body was tense, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, how many of us have gotten home and kind of thought, well, gee, I don't even remember driving home, right?
Like all the time. Yeah. How did I even get here?
That? Like live?
Yeah, so it's automatic. You didn't have to think about it. It was right there. And it's, and most of the time, we stay in the automatic mode when we're driving. Now, if we're in the middle of a thunderstorm and it's lightning and there's hailing, we switch out of that automatic mode, don't we?
Yeah, that's true.
So, and like if you gave me a physics textbook, I would be switching out of that automatic mode for reading really fast. So, but that's the whole thing. If they're spending their time and energy decoding and they're not understanding or comprehending the text, and my experience has been the majority of kids, unless they have a major language barrier, they're stuck on the decoding stage. It's not automatic for them. It doesn't flow. And that's a real issue. And if you're looking at Orton Gillingham, which is a particular style of teaching for children with dyslexia, but it doesn't just work with kids with dyslexia, it works with most kids.
Can you kind of break that down for us? Because I'm not sure. One of the things that I find really problematic in education is that those of us who don't have elementary certs, so I'm a single subject cert, you're using a lot of concepts that I've never been taught or familiar with, even though my students need them.
So Orton Gillingham is a 150-year-old methodology to teaching phonics to children. Okay, it's a program. There are a number of programs out there. Wilson, Barton, what's the other one? There's another one out there that's very common.
If you don't think of it, it'll come.
It'll come tonight at midnight, though.
Right? That's how it always.
We'll jump on and be like, "You guys, it was this," and then you can that. We'll all remember. We'll be like, "Great."
And the problem with those programs is that they're very, very expensive for training. They're very effective, but they're very time consuming, and they're generally one-on-one.
Mm.
So, but you can take a lot of the concepts and do small group with them and have it be very successful. And that was what I did for the last 28 years. I took Zoophonics and Orton Gillingham and combined them. And so we had drills, we had working in the sand, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we had blending drills for every single lesson that I introduced the kids to. So that repetition created automaticity. That repetition meant those kids could look at a word and sound it out, even if it wasn't a real word, in nanoseconds. And it meant the difference of kids getting out of RSP or not even coming into it, because I worked with response to intervention for the last 11 years. So let's talk about writing. A lot of kids get hung up on the writing. They can't spell, they can't sound things out. Again, one of the things you do with kids, even high school kids, if you go put a child through an Orton Gillingham program, they will do all of this with them, because when it's not there, it's not there. And that is working in a sand tray. And that is an auditory drill. And I would say, and I don't know if I have a sand tray here. Let's see if we can do this. Does that work? Probably doesn't work. I have a sand tray here.
Oh, yeah,
So
I see it.
Okay. So if I said to a student, they're going to go, ah. They're going to say the sound as they write it. And I'm going to use sand. Usually sand, I've got salt in this, but sand usually works best. And what that does, you now have a motor neurological imprint that you are creating. So as you go along, and kids are now older and they've done this and they've got that sound, and they're going to go, sat. They're going to go sat. And it's there. They don't think about how to form the letters. You get so many kids, especially if they have graphomotor issues, stuck on how to form the letters. And this solves it. That that brain arm is tied together. So my students who would get stuck on something, they would put their hands under their desk and they would start doing it. They've come back to me years later and told me, yeah, when I get stuck and I can't think of a sound, I just start moving. Or I can write everything really well now. I mean, I've had kids come back to me for years and talk to me about what it breaks through. It's a neurologically based, guys. It's whole brain based.
Mm-hmm.
And even in high school, it's not out of line to be doing as many motor things as you want. For instance, if I were teaching high school and I wanted to teach the difference between a ray and a line, I'd have kids making arm motions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different, but it keeps them on task a little bit more, and it makes them remember it better.
Yeah, and I know, Angie, you have a lot of movement with your kids when you are teaching. What are some of the things, because I think that plays a lot into memory, as you're saying, is when we get used to like moving along with remembering, then our brain does make different connections. What is it that you do in your classroom that's really effective?
So some of the things that I think I do it a whole bunch of different ways. My kids are older, and I work with a lot of students that their first language is not English. In fact, the majority of my students, their first language is not English, and so I have a lot of EL learners, so I have to teach sounds, but also make sure that I'm teaching my content. So in addition to plays where I like write the different levels, and then I do a lot of repetition and repeat. So I say it, you say it, I say it, you say it, but I never have them do it without movement. So if it's like it's like when we do our inalienable rights, we're like, I have inalienable rights, and so like inalienable, and we'll say it over and over again because that's a really hard word for them. It's like, and then we break it down and talk about what it is. So, and then they give me examples. But what I've learned is that if I don't do the repetition back and forth, that it doesn't work. And then once I get an audio, then I start dealing with it visual, and then I go back to audio. So I try to give it to them both ways, audio and visual. I don't always just give it to them visually. And the reason for that is a lot of times after they've heard it and they know it audio, when they read it, they don't realize what they're reading. And then when I say it and put it with them, there's this aha moment and they get excited. And since my readers are a little older, they go, oh yeah, that's how those sounds go together. And so that, to me, that reinforces what they're already learning in their English classes, where it should be kind of more broken down. And it gives them a little bit more autonomy. And now we're at the point of the year because, it's already April. They ask each other first. So I'll hear them like, sound that out for me or whatever. And then, how do you say that word again? And so then they kind of rely on each other. And then when they don't know, they ask me. And I always give them like candy or snacks when they don't know how to say a word. So if they say something like, I don't know how to say this word, miss, I'll give them a Jolly Rancher and say like, thank you so much for asking me. Because I really want to build that, like, I don't know, and I'm asking for help is a good sign.
What I think that I would do there, and you might do this, is I think I would put it on the board in the correct phonetic chunks and have them read each chunk. And then the reason I would do that is because that's going to help them see other chunks as they're moving along. So that would be a really good way to break the phonics down for them to get really comfortable with looking and chunking words. Here's what we know. We know good readers chunk automatically. We know poor readers don't.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like the idea of scaffolding, so that you actually have, so I do a lot with primary source documents, and the primary, like right now we're doing annexation of Texas. And so it's got a lot of, it's literally pamphlets that are anti-Texas. And so it's got a lot of dense language. So I love the idea of having like the actual primary source document and then a chunked down version of the document so that they can see both, and then having them try the original, then chunking it up, and then going back to the original.
Yeah, and I'd write it on the board when you're first introducing. I mean, I would introduce the word as a whole, but then chunk it on the board for them. just because then they're getting that concept in their heads that these words aren't that hard. They're just bits put together.
Right. They're just long.
And, yeah. And so you're modeling those bits put together. And again, that's really what Anita Archer has done in her Rewards for History book. So we give these kids the kind of fun subjects, but they have the vocabulary in them that is really tough for a lot of them, especially our ELL students. So it's you know, a lot of new teachers really have difficulty with the concept. They can talk to me just fine. Their language is fine. And they don't understand that academic vocabulary is kind of hidden. And it's really hard for you to figure out when kids don't have it.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to study under Dr. McKenna, who does her work on literacy at University of Montana, and she's very prolific.
Yes.
And her work, and I think she really influenced me as a teacher because she's amazing and I got to work with her. But she just kept saying, you have to read to them. It's totally fine for you to pick up. So we do a lot of power highlighting. So we take the Declaration of Independence or the Gettysburg Address, or because I don't have time really to chunk every single word down. The standards are too big. So if I take a primary source document and a highlighter, and besides, I also have to teach the students who are at the top of my class, because in the class I teach right now, I have students who are first grade and kindergartner readers and kids who are 9th and 10th in the same classroom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So one way to kind of deal with that, if that's something you're facing, or one thing that's worked for me, is we take highlighters and I teach them to power highlight, and then I have them circle the words they don't know, and then they write them on the backboard, and then we study those words as a class. And sometimes the kids can explain to each other and be the teacher, and then what's left I come in and teach. And that's always a fun way to get some community involved in decoding the text.
And that's a great way to get them doing that. The other thing that you can do, and this sounds almost backwards, but I find that it really helps kids who are having difficulty reading, is you give them the questions that they're going to answer ahead of time.
Yep, that's great. That's so important. Ding, 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 ding. Do that. And the passages, like I do that with my plays. If I have a student who I know really is brand new to the country, doesn't speak any English, I'll give them a part in the play that's like one sentence or two sentences, but I'll give it to them the day or 2 days before and let them study. And then nobody else knows the play is coming. They've been studying for 2 days, and then they show up with their line all excited, and everybody gives them a round of applause. And it's so cool. And nobody knows that it's like our little secret. Nobody knows they've been practicing ahead of time, you know?
Well, the other thing that we have a tendency not to do in schools is we don't teach enough study skills for older kids. How do you read the paragraph? How do you find the main idea? All of those things, you know, they've got it. No, they don't. And so
let's stop there. So
I think that's a really good point, because that was a discussion we were having yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Is the students, our 8th graders, are coming in and freezing up when they have a difficult passage or they have a question because they don't know those basic study skills. So how do you address that?
Well, what I had in when I always took my 5th graders who were going to be going to 6th grade, and we spent a lot of time on study skills. Things as simple as, how do you write, where do you put your name in junior high on your papers? Just that alone. Your name, today's date, the assignment number, the page number. We would even practice that. But then one of the things we would do is we would go through some reading and try to find out, how do you find the main idea? You know, and so we would go through activities to find the main idea. We would go through activities, how to use, how do you find a particular piece of information in a book? We would do all of those particular activities. And I had a study skills book that I used with them, but it was hard for them. And I thought that would have been pretty easy, but I was sort of surprised how difficult it was for them. And so once I tried it, it was every year we're going through study skills. And they probably need that in junior high before they come.
Mm-hmm.
High school's a lot.
High school is a lot, yeah. And I think the kids, they sometimes start high school with this impression that it's going to be just like elementary and middle school was. And then it hits them their freshman year and they think, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive? Because these skills, it kind of like backs up on them. There's
the
so many
ability to organize themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to look at those brains aren't matured. And if a kid's got ADHD, the rule of law from the brain experts is they're about 4 years behind maturity wise. So I want you to think about 16-year-old kids who are ADHD and the impulse control of a 12-year-old.
Is that true across genders?
I don't know if it's across genders, but this is coming from brain experts from Stanford and St. John's Hopkins. So that's where the information came from.
Yeah, we'll try to find that
interesting.
link below because I hadn't heard anything about that. That's very.
If you remind me, I can look for it. I have it in. I think I have it in my brain research slideshow, which all came from the Learning in the Brain conference, which has got brain experts from all over the world. It's a great conference, by the way.
That sounds like an amazing conference.
It's an amazing conference.
While we're talking about cognitive behavior, one of the things I think that really helps my students is I tell them, you're just like with your muscles, you're supposed to be able to run a mile. So you're also supposed to be able to focus for every minute you are old. So if you're 13, you're supposed to stay on task for 13 minutes. If you're 15, you're supposed to, okay, that may sound arbitrary to you, right? But it's for timeouts. It starts with little kids for timeouts. But my students love it. And they're like, well, we'll stay on task for 15 minutes because we're more mature. And there's so much research into if you identify with a thing, you become a thing. So they did a whole bunch of research, and I'll find the link and put it below too. Like in second, third, and fourth graders, and they told them they were really clean. And they're just like, oh, you guys are so clean. And they started actually cleaning up the classroom more. And they became a cleaner, they became what they believed they were. And it's so true, like with time. So I'll be like, okay, we're going to do 15 minutes of silent reading and highlighting. Or I'll say like, well, you're 13, so can you try to do 13? And they'll be like, we can do 15. And I'm always surprised who it is who says that they can do 15. It's the kids I'm worried about doing 3 minutes. And they're like, we've got 15. And then, of course, their mind wanders and you just do a gentle refocuser and say, I'm so proud of you for doing 15 minutes. You're so smart and strong. And then they're just, excited to get back to task.
So that reminds me of a story, if I may. And this is a story about James. James came into my room. He walked in. He was a second grader and he just moved to our school, middle of the year. And he goes, hi, I'm James. I can't read and I can't pay attention. Oh. This is who James defined himself. I just looked at him and said, okay. James told me who he was and what he believed about himself, and I wasn't going to argue with him. If I sat there and went, oh, James, I'm sure you can't. No, that wasn't the way to treat him. The way was me to go, okay. And then I went, do you see the prize box over there? He goes, yeah. I said, anything you want? He goes, yeah. I said, do you think you can pay attention for 2 minutes? He said, sure, I can pay attention for 2 minutes. I had one of those little timers that had this red thing. We started doing a task for 2 minutes. And he dinged and he got his prize. And I said, how about 5? Can you pay attention for 5 minutes? He goes, sure. So we did 5 minutes twice, and then we did a 10-minute. And the next day he comes back and we start on 10 minutes. And then it was 15. And by within 3 days, he was paying it. He didn't need a timer. He stayed on paying attention for every task he was able to do. So, and then the other part of was the reading. And I just would look at him and say, well, okay, you can't read. We'll see. I said, I can teach anybody to read. I said, I'm the world's greatest reading teacher.
There you go. But there's something to that, and especially when, they believe in you, they're going to try,
Well, and then what I did is I taught him to read in a way he'd never been taught before. And you see, and that made a huge difference. Did James walk away without problems? No. He was super ADHD. He came from an extremely dysfunctional family. He was the kind of the scapegoat of the family. He was always in trouble, but not for me. I loved James. And he responded to what we did. But the point being, when a kid tells you who he is, you have to believe him, and then you have to meet him where he's at.
Or her, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to meet him where he's at. Again, I'm in a situation where I'm working with SPED kids, so I have smaller groups. But
what is the politically correct?
I know we keep hearing about like categorical language. What's
that we're not supposed to
appropriate
use that
term?
That like
well, he's a SPED
students
kid
with disabilities or students with cognitive challenges, or what's
neurodiversity?
Is it neurodiversity?
We were just in a training and we were told, like, you don't ever say SPED kids because the student is more than that. So it would be like students with learning or cognitive differences is what they said.
Well, I called it SPED because I was running a SPED program.
And are they still using, because I don't think that they're using that term anymore. Like I
don't think that it's not being used. I think maybe it's out of favor.
That's a nice way to say it. I was like, how do you talk about this without
without like offending anyone?
Well, I think we don't offend people. Yeah.
Being in a SPED program doesn't give you the diagnosis of what the child has. So what was really nice for the last 13 years is it wasn't the SPED program, it was Tier 3 Reading Lab. And I had probably only 6 kids on an IEP because we were delivering this RTI program that worked extremely well. Mm-hmm. And by the time they got to 5th grade, we might have to assess 4 or 5 students is all. The rest were on grade level.
Wow.
Okay.
But it was really well. It was well done. It was well researched. It was a really a team approach, and we used data from the get-go.
So help us out. We have to wrap up in the next 10 minutes. So break it down for us. What are the highlights? What are the top 3 things you want us to know? Maybe the top 3 programs you've ever used. Where do you want us to start with blending? Let me say back, and then you can help me. What I heard is I need to start with blending. There's an assumption that students know how to blend, and they probably don't. So when I hit those big words, even some of the more words that I expect them to know, like advocate, that they struggle with, I can break those kind of words down, or advocate,
Yes.
So I need to break them down and blend. I need to involve movement and interaction. I can bring big balls or little hacky sacks. I can use paper and drop things. And then after that, I'm working on fluency. So me reading to them is good. Them reading to each other is good. What else? What am I missing?
Without blending, you don't achieve fluency. So that's part of the trick. The more motor motions you can do, having kids stand up to read sometimes, believe it or not, can help some. That's
interesting because in my play, they always stand to read. And I'd never thought of that, but I wonder how much of it is just putting on the costume and standing up.
Well, let me tell you, and I want to get interest of time, but let me tell you, there's something I used to do with students, and there's actually information behind this. If you've got a student who read like this, really choppy, if you can get that student to stand up and march opposite arm and leg, and the younger students have trouble doing bilateral, these kids probably had trouble crawling when they were little. You could get them to march for a minute, opposite arm and leg. They will sit down and they will read smoother. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating.
Well, and it works perfect with history.
I know. I have a few students I want to try that with tomorrow.
Well, what it is they do not have that hot connection between the two sides of the brain. And so when you do that and you warm it up, all of a sudden that pathway is a little hotter. And it goes back and forth freely.
Wow.
Look, our brains are interesting. You know, I could spend some time talking to you about why dyslexia or learning disabilities run in family. We've got brain things going on that cause it to run in certain families. And how do you overcome that? Is it set for life? Actually, no, it's not. There's a lot of things out there. So I've always been fascinated by brain and the learning. Some of the Sousa books. I don't know if you guys know who Sousa is. He's got How the Brain Learns to Read, the Special Education Brain. He's got several brain books out there that are really worth taking a look at. Souza.
Okay.
But here's the other big thing. Every kid's different. You know?
And every teacher is different. And we got to teach to our strengths too, right?
That's true.
Yeah. But when you add games, kids, the research shows that kids are more likely to remember something when you play a game with them. And here's why. A game stresses the brain out just a little tiny bit. Too little doesn't work. Too much doesn't work. But a little bit of stress for the brain makes them remember it better. If you want your students, here's another clue. If you want your students to remember something really important, tell them the last thing they did right before they walk out of your classroom. Tell them that again. And they'll be more likely to remember it.
Or have them tell you, right?
Or have them tell you. That's a good way to do it too.
I make them yell it at me.
and having and telling them to do it right before PE. Have them, if kids want to pass the test, have them study it right before they go out to PE. And as they're out at PE, it is working and going around in their brain.
Oh.
Yes.
So get our PE teachers to let them review their notes before they go.
Right? During warm-ups, make sure they review their vocabulary and their history notes.
Well, thank you so much for meeting with us. Where can people find you if they want to have more questions or want more coaching? Or
they can email me at Lancaster nu.edu. I work for National University. And the other thing that I'm telling you, and I'm not trying to put a plug, is probably in about 3 months, I will be publishing, along with Zoophonics, a first grade dyslexia style curriculum with Zoophonics.
That's awesome. So first grade, if you're a first grade teacher out here, for sure, reach out. Get excited about Zoophonics. Anything else you want to leave? Oh, did you take our style quiz? Do you know what style teacher you are?
I don't think I took the quiz.
Oh, you better take the quiz and find out what kind of style teacher you are. And for everybody watching this, I hope you've taken your style quiz, because a lot of what she's talking about fits into, which style would you say, Candace?
I would say, with all the movement, engagement, activity, I would say power dresser.
Yep, this is a lot of power dresser because we're doing movement, with learning. So this is fitting this set of the 11 components of learning. This is heavily leaning into the engagement and the buy-in and the confidence elements of learning, which are super, super important. So if you're a power dresser, this will probably be a strength you're already doing. Maybe even vintage is out there doing some of this stuff. As a vintage, I can say that's true. But hopefully this is helpful for all the learning, the teaching styles. Gail, thank you so much for showing up and teaching us.
Thank you, guys. This was fun. And where do I find the Teaching Styles survey?
Awesome. Go for it. Candace.
I will put a link in the chat right now. It's a quick quiz. I think 10 questions now it's at.
And anytime you're on our YouTube channel, you can just go to Flair Educators. There's a link tree. There's a teacher survey, how to do it. And if you work with teachers, let me just remind you, if you want your teachers to have success, pair new teachers with older teachers that have the same style, because it's really looking at how they learn, what their teaching philosophy is. And if you're an older teacher like me and you want to push yourself, start pairing and learning from teachers of opposite styles.
Right. That's how you push it. Right.
Oh, that's really cool. I worked with some grants, and I'm where they pair up with mentor teachers, and I'm going to share that with the person who was managing.
Oh my gosh. It makes such a difference. I work as an instructional coach with so many new teachers, and when coaching them and working with them, having them pair with the teachers that are their same style, there was so much more, not improvement, because they're all amazing from the start, but like so much more growth than if they were just like, the neighbor teacher, or, oh, this teacher, she's nice to me in the hallway, so I'm going to go see her classroom. But it makes such a big difference.
And when you're paired with the same style, that the confidence is so much higher, because they can see themselves. Like one of the teachers that I work with, Mrs. Roman, she's just my favorite person in the whole world, but she's always saying like, I can do that. I can see myself doing that, because we're the same style. And so when I say, or she'll come over and go, show me what lesson plan you've done for this. And she looks and goes, oh, I can do that. But when she tries to learn from opposite styles, she gets more frustrated because she can't see herself running the classway that way, or enacting the classroom in that way, and vice versa. I'm a very heavily like vintage power dresser teacher. And so chic teachers can get really frustrated with me because I'm not as like organized and procedural. And so that can be a challenge. And I think it's really important that we all just set ourselves up for success. So if you are burning out, remember to dig into your style and to connect with teachers that have your style, because it's so much fun.
Yeah, and we'd love to know what style you end up being. So,
okay. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Should we guess? Should we guess what style Gail's gonna be?
Oh, I say power dresser.
You always say that. That's your style. I
know, because I want people to join the power dresser club.
Okay, so I just say mine then. I think you're gonna be vintage. Well, I fashionista probably.
Part of being a resource specialist is that you have to be very, very organized. So I have that aspect as well. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and all of your research. And oh my gosh, we learned so much from you this evening.
We can't wait to promote your book. Let us know when it comes out so we can plug it here.
All right.
Definitely.
I will do that. It's actually a whole curriculum with
there you go.
Stand trays and books and videos. It's a whole curriculum. So
oh wow, that's awesome. I can't wait to see it.
And the funniest part, I wrote it 35 years ago.
I'll bet it's still working. You know why? Because it's in the pre-computer time, and these kids are so sick of the screens. They are so into old school learning, and they are just into like put cards on your forehead and act out vocabulary words. Like I did that heads up game with them, and they were laughing and playing for the entire hour. They just love that. Just no screens. They're just happy to be interacting with each other, right?
Learning play is learning play.
Mm-hmm.
And when the other thing to remember, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but when we were doing response to intervention and I had the lowest first graders in the school, they hadn't learned their alphabet. They didn't know the sounds. They didn't know the names of the letters. I didn't start off that day doing anything like that with them. I handed them a picture of a card that had an animal on it. And I said, you need to go on an animal hunt. And they had to go around the classroom and they had to find the puppet that matched that animal. And then they got to come back up and they put the puppet on their hand and tell me what that animal says. And they all said the name of the sound the animal made, and they would make the movements. So I deliberately took it away from sitting down at a table because they needed to start learning a different way.
All right, Candace, she's a power dresser.
I think I'm going to be right.
All right, guys, later. Send me that link.
Yes, I will definitely. Thank you so much again. We have really enjoyed this hour.
All right, thank you very much.
Bye, my friend.
Bye.